Night arrives early here, not because it is eager, but because no one has learned how to stop it. There are no clocks to argue with the dark, no lamps bright enough to pretend the world continues past the reach of firelight. The village gathers inward as the sky deepens, cottages shrinking into themselves, doors pulled shut with the kind of care that suggests practice. Beyond the last roof, the road gives up entirely, dissolving into mud and shadow like it never intended to go anywhere important. You stand at the edge of the firelight where warmth thins and certainty ends. This is where stories begin. Not the kind meant for daylight. Not the kind anyone would swear are true. These are spoken softly, shared between breaths, shaped by fear that has had a long time to get comfortable. The fire pops. Someone clears their throat. Someone else laughs too quickly, as if laughter might seal a crack before something slips through. Legends are born here, not as entertainment, but as warnings. In a world with few answers, imagination does the work that explanation cannot. It fills silence the way smoke fills a room, slowly, thoroughly, impossible to ignore. You listen because everyone listens. Because not listening feels worse. Some whispers refuse to fade. They cling to places, to names, to scars in the land itself. You are told these are just stories. You are also told not to go near the old wood after dark. Both statements are delivered with the same straight-faced dot as embers settle and the night deepens. The past leans closer. It does not knock. It does not ask permission. It waits until you are tired enough to listen. Morning comes reluctantly, like it regrets being talked into it. The village wakes stiff and quiet, joints complaining louder than mouths. Smoke rises again, thinner this time, practical instead of comforting. The ground is cold underfoot, damp with last night's breath. You step carefully because mud remembers who slips. Work begins without ceremony. Someone feeds animals that do not care about your sleep. Someone kneads dough that smells faintly sour and alive. Life insists on itself here, even when everyone would prefer one more hour beside the fire dot in daylight. The village looks harmless, ordinary. That's the trick. Wood and wattle lean against each other for support. Roofs sag. Chickens wander with the confidence of creatures that know they will not be blamed for anything important. You can almost convince yourself that last night's unease was nothing more than shadows misbehaving. Almost. But then you notice the way people avoid looking toward the trees. The way paths curve subtly away from certain patches of ground. The way names are dropped mid-sentence, replaced with vague gestures and silence. You feel it when you work the fields. The soil is heavy, stubborn, packed with stones that feel placed deliberately to bruise your hands. Your back aches in a way that suggests this will not be the last time. Sweat runs cold when the wind shifts. You smell earth, manure, rot, and something else underneath it all, something metallic, old, like blood that has learned how to hide. You tell yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself many things. By midday, hunger sharpens everyone's edges. Bread is shared, hard crust scraping your gums. Cheese sweats in the sun. Someone mentions a traveler who never arrived. Someone else shrugs. Roads are unreliable. So are people. The explanation is accepted because it must be. You work until your body stops asking why. That is the goal. After all, as evening approaches again, unease returns like a debt collector who knows you are home. Animals grow restless for no obvious reason. Dogs bark at nothing and then refuse to leave the doorway. The light thins, stretched too far between too many tasks. You feel watched, not in a dramatic way, but in the dull, persistent sense that something has learned your outline. Fires are lit early. Doors close quickly. Night is not invited, but it comes anyway. You sit near the fire again, because there is nowhere else to sit. The stories return, different mouths, same shapes. A woman speaks of a child who wandered too far and came back wrong. A man mutters about sounds in the marsh that mimic voices. Someone swears they saw movement where nothing should move. The details don't match. The feeling does. These stories are not meant to be believed. They are meant to be remembered. You laugh at the right places. You nod when expected. Inside, something tightens, like a knot learning it will not be untied tonight. Sleep comes badly. The mattress is thin. Straw pokes through like accusations. Your muscles throb, reminding you that rest is conditional. Outside, the night breathes. Wind drags branches against walls. An owl calls out, unanswered. You dream of paths that lead nowhere, of footsteps behind you that never quite catch up. You wake with your heart already moving too fast. The dark feels closer now, pressed up against the walls, listening. Days pass. They always do. Work continues because it has to. You settle into the rhythm of discomfort. Hands blister, then harden. The body adapts to almost anything if given no alternative. The stories do not leave. They shift, change clothing, trade names. Someone points out a hill and tells you not to climb it. Someone mentions a ruined chapel swallowed by trees. You are told these things casually, like weather advice. The tone is what unsettles you. Fear has been folded into routine here, like a tool kept within reach. One afternoon, you are sent beyond the fields to gather wood. The path narrows quickly, swallowed by undergrowth that seems offended by your presence. The forest smells damp and old, layered with decay and life feeding on itself. Light filters down in thin, uncertain strips. You feel smaller here, not because the trees are tall, but because the ground feels deep. Every sound carries too far. Every silence feels intentional. You work quickly, snapping branches, stacking them with shaking hands you pretend are cold. Somewhere deeper in the trees, something moves. You do not look. Looking feels like permission. You return to the village with your bundle and a story you will not tell. Others return with the same tight expressions. No one asks questions. Questions invite answers, and answers are not always helpful. That night, the fire burns lower. Someone mentions the old times when things were worse. Someone else says they are worse now. Both statements are accepted. The past here is not linear. It circles, repeats, chews on itself. You listen until your eyelids droop. The stories blur into the crackle of wood and the hiss of sap. You feel yourself sinking, not into sleep, but into something heavier. As seasons shift, the land grows harder. Winter arrives without drama, just persistence. Cold creeps into everything. The village contracts further, bodies pressed close for warmth and reassurance. Food grows scarce. Patience grows thinner. Old fears sharpen. Hunger has a way of making monsters feel closer. People watch each other more carefully now. Accusations hang unspoken in the air, waiting for the right moment to land. Someone coughs too long. Someone mutters prayers too loudly. Unease looks for a shape to blame. Snow muffles the world, hiding tracks, hiding mistakes. Fires struggle. Smoke clings low, bitter in your throat. Nights stretch until they lose their edges. Stories become darker, more specific. Names are whispered now, not just places. You feel the village turning inward, suspicion folding into every interaction. Safety feels temporary. It always was, but now everyone knows it. When something finally happens, and it always does, it is both sudden and inevitable. A scream cuts through the night, sharp enough to wake the dead. You are on your feet before you understand why. People gather, torches flaring, fear loud and directionless. Someone is missing. Someone always is. The forest is blamed. The marsh. The old hill. The stories line up eagerly, ready to be useful. You stand there, cold seeping into your bones, watching imagination become action. Afterward, there is quiet. The wrong kind. Life resumes because it must, but something has shifted. The stories have teeth now. Children are kept closer. Paths are avoided more carefully. The fire feels smaller, less convincing. You realize then that the legends were never meant to explain the world. They were meant to survive it. Years pass like this, marked by work, by fear, by brief, stubborn moments of joy that feel almost defiant. You laugh when you can. You love when allowed. You sleep lightly. The past presses close, not as memory, but as presence. You understand now that unease is not a mistake of the dark. It is a record, a way of remembering what happened when no one was writing it down. One night, older now, heavier with experience you did not ask for, you sit by the fire and listen to a child repeat a story you once heard. The details are wrong. The fear is right. You say nothing. You let it pass on, reshaped, necessary. Outside, the road still dissolves into shadow. The forest still waits. The world remains unanswered dot as embers fade and the firelight thins. You feel sleep pull at you again, deep and slow. Not the comfort of forgetting, but the weight of knowing. The past does not shout. It whispers patiently until someone listens. And here, at the edge of the firelight, you always do. They tell you the dead walk at dusk. Not quickly, not purposefully. They rise stiff and wrong, dragging themselves along roads already soaked with too much ending. You are told to lock your doors before the light goes thin, to bar shutters tight, to keep candles low. Villagers swear they've seen them, shapes moving through fog, limbs bent at impossible angles, mouths opening without sound. You believe them, because believing feels safer than testing it. Centuries later, the truth does not feel kinder. These are plague roads. Death does not wait politely here. Bodies are buried in a hurry, prayers shortened, shovels moving faster than certainty. Some are gone. Some are almost gone. Some are still breathing when earth hits their faces. No one checks too carefully. Hunger makes hands shake. Fear makes mercy inefficient. The line between life and death blurs until it feels rude to insist on clarity. You walk these roads yourself, thin as rumor, ribs sharp under skin pulled tight by sickness. Fog clings low, cold and wet, wrapping itself around ankles like it wants to be held. You move stiffly because joints ache, because muscles have forgotten strength, because standing upright already feels like arrogance. To someone watching from behind a locked door, you do not look alive. You look like something that refuses to lie down. The ground itself does not stay still. Mass graves shift as gases escape the dead, soil swelling and settling like a slow breath. Earth moves. Shapes change. A hand appears where none should be. The village watches and whispers. Stories grow teeth. The walking dead are not born of fantasy. They are born of trauma, of a world choking on loss, watching familiar bodies fail, watching survivors stagger forward when they should have been finished. What haunted them was not resurrection. It was survival, dragging itself through fog, insisting on continuing when everything else had already stopped. She lives where the village pretends not to look. Just far enough from the last cottage that protection thins, just close enough to the forest that blame feels convenient. You know the path to her door, even if you would never admit it aloud. Everyone does. Feet find it easily in the dark. People come to her quietly, for herbs when a cough will not leave, for hands steady enough to guide a birth, for advice that does not echo with authority. She listens more than she speaks. That alone makes her dangerous dot by daylight, the same mouths that thanked her fall carefully silent. Gratitude curdles quickly here. The legend insists witches curse crops, sour milk, summon storms with spiteful hands. The truth is smaller, sharper, harder to defend against. She knows things. She remembers which roots numb pain. She understands bodies, grief, timing. She survives without a husband's name to shield her. In a world balanced on fear, knowledge is an insult. When famine presses and fields fail, explanations are demanded. Storms do not answer questions. Disease does not apologize. People do. Or rather, people are offered up. Accusations arrive dressed as concern. Trials follow rituals, not justice. Words are chosen carefully to trap. Confessions are coaxed from pain, shaped until they fit the story everyone already agreed upon. You watch as neighbors avert their eyes, relieved it is not them standing there. Fire does the rest. It is efficient. Flesh burns. Hair curls. Smoke carries a smell you will never forget. Fear, fat, finality. The crowd breathes it in and calls it cleansing. When it is over, ashes scatter back into the soil. Fields are planted again. Life continues, stubborn and unashamed. She was not a monster. She was a reminder. That understanding threatens power. That survival outside permission is unforgivable. And long after the flames die, the land grows anyway, fed, ironically, by the women accused of ruining it. Under moonlight, something is said to hunt the forests. You hear about it before you ever hear it. A thing that stands upright, shoulders wrong, breath loud enough to carry between trees. It howls, not like an animal calling blindly, but like something choosing to be heard. Doors are barred earlier now. Children are pulled close. Fires are kept low. The word spreads quickly because it has work to do. Werewolf, a shape fear can point at. You walk the edge of the forest with your heart, already prepared to run. The moon sharpens everything, turning branches into ribs, shadows into threats with opinions. Every snapped twig feels intentional. You remember the stories, men shedding skin, teeth lengthening, hunger taking over completely. You are told it is magic. You are told it is a curse. You are told not to ask too many questions. But the truth has been walking beside you this whole time, smelling of rot and grain gone wrong. Bread that makes your head swim. Limbs that tremble without warning. Men returned from war with eyes that don't settle, hands that move before permission arrives. Rabies foams at mouths and scrambles sense. Hunger hollows people until instinct takes over, until violence feels simpler than restraint. You see it in soldiers who cannot sleep, in peasants who snap under winters that never seem to end. Hallucinations blur the line between body and idea. Pain rewrites memory. A man does something he cannot explain, and the village cannot survive that kind of uncertainty. So it gives him fur, claws, a name that lives safely outside the human circle. To name the beast is to survive it. To say werewolf instead of neighbor, instead of brother, instead of yourself, if things had gone slightly worse. The monster is not born of magic. It is born when war, starvation, and disease strip humanity down to reflex. Fear imagines fur where shame should be. And under the moon, what howls is not a curse. It is what's left when order fails and instinct finally steps forward. Unashamed. They teach you to listen for bells in places no one should be listening at all. Beneath the soil. Beneath prayers. Beneath certainty. Death here is not clean enough to trust. Medieval medicine cannot always tell when a body has finished its argument with breath. A chest stops rising. Eyes refuse to answer. That is usually enough. Usually. But not always. So they tie bells to coffins. Thin strings trail upward through packed earth like fragile lifelines, ridiculous and desperate at once. Graveyards grow quiet in a way that presses against your ears. Every mound feels unfinished. Every burial feels like a wager placed too quickly. You pass these places carefully, because fear has taught you that sound travels strangely through soil. And sometimes, rarely, mercifully, the bell rings, not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. A thin, broken sound that crawls upward and freezes everyone who hears it. Digging follows in a frenzy that feels like prayer turned violent. Shovels bite earth. Hands blister. Breath comes hard and uneven. By the time the coffin is reached, the bell is always still. Wood is scratched raw from the inside. Nails are broken. Fingers twisted into shapes no living hand should hold. The story is told afterward, quietly, with shaking voices. No one sleeps well for days. The legend says trapped souls cried from the earth. The truth is crueler and smaller. Living people woke up alone in the dark, wrapped in wood, air thinning, understanding arriving too late. Graveyards become places of listening rather than mourning. Silence weighs heavier than grief ever did. Death here is not an ending. It is a risk. And the living learn to move carefully around it, ears tuned, hearts tight, always wondering whether the ground beneath them might answer back. They tell you not to go near the river when the light thins. Not because it is water. Water sounds harmless when you say it slowly, but because something waits there, pale and patient, watching reflections instead of faces. Children repeat the warning to each other with nervous laughter, daring feet to edge closer anyway. You remember the rule because rules here are rarely abstract. They are written in absence. The river looks calm most days. That is how it tricks you. It slides past the village with a sound like breathing, steady and reassuring, pretending it has nowhere urgent to be. Banks are soft, deceptively welcoming. Mud grips ankles without warning. One careless step becomes two, and then the current decides the rest without asking your opinion. There are no railings, no markers, just water doing what water has always done. Floods come quietly, overnight sometimes. The river swells while people sleep, climbing out of itself, spreading into fields, into paths, into houses that thought distance was protection. When it retreats, it leaves behind wreckage and questions. Days later, bodies surface downstream, caught on reeds, skin altered by cold and time until recognition becomes an act of imagination. Mothers identify clothing. Fathers stare too long. The village learns new ways to be silent. Grief does what grief must. It gives the horror a shape that can be spoken to. Creatures are named. Stories sharpen. Pale hands reach from the water in whispered warnings. Monsters take children who disobey. The truth is less theatrical and harder to forgive. The river does not hunt. It does not choose. It simply continues. The legends are not lies. They are barriers woven from sorrow and love, stretched thin across dangerous places. They exist to keep small feet away from dark currents, to turn fear into something useful. The river never needed claws. It only needed silence, and the living learned too late how loud that silence could be. They say some castles ate men. That once you passed through certain doors, the stone itself decided you would never come back out. You imagine teeth in the walls, mouths in the dark. The truth is less dramatic and far more effective. You are led downward, not pushed, not rushed. Just guided, like this is a reasonable place for a person to end up. The air cools immediately. Light thins, then gives up altogether. The dungeon does not whisper at first. It waits. Your eyes ache from trying to see. The floor is damp, uneven, slick with something you do not examine too closely. A door closes. Not loudly. That would suggest interest. This sound is final because it is bored. Time dissolves here. There are no markers for it, no edges. Food arrives irregularly, if it arrives at all. A crust. A cup. Sometimes nothing. Hunger stops being sharp and becomes dull, heavy, like a second body pressing against yours. You count breaths until counting feels childish. You speak out loud just to hear a voice, then stop when the sound comes back wrong. No sentence is read. No trial remembered. Somewhere above, a clerk fails to write your name down. or writes it and never looks at it again. Forgetting is the system working correctly. You are not meant to die quickly. You are meant to fade until even suffering grows tired of you. When death comes, it is quiet. No audience. No lesson learned. Just absence settling into a space that was already prepared for it. Later, people call the place cursed. They say it is haunted. They lower their voices and blame spirits because that feels safer than blaming intention. But the walls remember. They hold the shape of voices that called out and were never answered. These castles were not monsters. They were tools. Instruments of power designed to erase a person so thoroughly that even their disappearance stopped mattering. Stone did not eat you. It simply made room for you to be forgotten. They call it laughter, but it does not sound kind. It starts in the streets, where bodies are packed too close and sleep has been thin for too long. Someone begins to move strangely, feet tapping without music, a grin pulled too wide across a face that looks frightened of itself. Then another joins. Then another. Soon the town is watching people dance, who did not choose to stand up in the first place. You stand at the edge and feel it itch under your skin. Laughter spills out in sharp, broken bursts, twisting suddenly into screams when breath runs out. Legs jerk and stamp against stone until shoes split and feet bleed. Skirts tear. Knees buckle. Bodies collapse, only to rise again, dragged upright by something that refuses rest. The sound is unbearable, joy stripped of consent, turned violent by repetition. Observers cross themselves. Demons are blamed quickly. It helps to have a name for what you cannot stop. But this is not possession. This is exhaustion finding an exit. Fear has nowhere left to go. Grief has been sitting too long with no listener. Hunger, plague, loss, sermons about endurance, all of it presses inward until something bursts outward through muscle and bone. The body moves because the mind cannot hold everything anymore. Pain becomes rhythm. Despair borrows legs. You watch until your calves ache in sympathy. Until your jaw tightens because you are afraid your mouth might join in. The laughter spreads not because it is funny, but because fear recognizes itself. Even standing still feels dangerous now. Stillness looks like judgment when it finally ends, and it always does. When bodies fail hard enough, the street is quiet in a way that feels bruised. Blood stains the stones. Shoes lie abandoned. Survivors are carried away, shaking, embarrassed, hollowed out. The town exhales, ashamed of what it saw and relieved it did not catch it. Later, they will call it cursed laughter. They will warn children. They will whisper about demons. The truth is harder to carry. Even joy can turn against you when a society is breaking, and the body remembers pain long after words have given up. You hear about the dogs before you ever see one. Massive shapes at the crossroads, where paths hesitate and no one likes to linger. Black fur swallowing what little light there is. Eyes burning low and steady, not flashing, not frantic, patient. Travelers swear that if the dog looks at you, really looks, you will be dead before the week is out. People nod when this is said. Too many nods to be coincidence. You travel anyway, because staying put can kill you just as efficiently. Night travel is cheaper, quieter, and far more dangerous. The road is uneven, slick with damp, and your body is already working harder than it should. Hunger makes your legs feel borrowed. Illness keeps time in your chest. The dark presses close enough to feel personal. When something large moves at the edge of your vision, your heart decides before your mind does. Sometimes it is a wolf, ribs sharp beneath its coat, pushed closer to humans by empty woods and colder winters. Sometimes it is a mastiff, bred for size and loyalty, guarding an estate that does not care whether you know the boundary exists. To meet either alone, tired, half sick, feels unreal. Fear stretches them larger than they are. Your breath comes fast. Your hands shake. The animal does not need to attack. Standing there is often enough. Those who survive the encounter stagger on, weaker, shaken, exposed to cold. They no longer have strength to resist. Fever follows. Lungs fill. Sleep deepens and does not release. Death arrives later, politely disconnected from the moment on the road. But memory is not interested in politeness. It stitches the events together and calls it an omen. So the legend holds. Black dogs still wait at crossroads in stories, eyes glowing, future shortening. Not because they caused death, but because they were seen when death was already close. The warning remains etched into memory. Do not travel alone. Do not trust the dark. Do not assume you are as strong as you feel during the day. The road remembers the tired. The dogs simply witness them. They show you the body by candlelight, because miracles look better that way. The chamber is cool, stone drinking warmth greedily, air dry enough to sting your nose. The saint lies still, wrapped carefully, skin pale but intact, features softened rather than ruined. You expect the smell first. It never comes. People around you inhale sharply anyway, bracing for it, then exhale something that sounds like relief, pretending to be awe. You are told this is holiness made visible. Flesh that refused to rot. Proof that God noticed. Pilgrims weep on cue, tears tracking clean lines down faces already worn thin by travel and hunger. Hands reach out but stop short, unsure whether touching would contaminate the miracle or themselves. The candles flicker, making the body seem to breathe if you stare too long. You don't mention that cold and dryness preserve things. You don't mention salt winds, sealed chambers, winter soil. This is not the moment for explanations. Faith needs something it can point at. You kneel because everyone kneels. Stone presses into your knees, honest and unforgiving. You feel small gratitude bloom anyway, inconvenient and real. In a world where everything decays quickly, crops, promises, people, the idea that something might last feels intoxicating. Even if only for a while. Especially if only for a while, the saint becomes an anchor. A reason to keep walking. To believe corruption is not inevitable, that purity might delay it. Candlelight turns skin into promise. Silence thickens with hope. You understand then that the miracle is not the body. It is what the body allows people to feel without shame. Later, the saint will darken, soften, join the rest of you. But for now, here in the cool hush, belief rests gently on preserved flesh, and that is enough to keep despair at bay for one more night. The story is already waiting for you when you arrive. It always is. Whispered first, then repeated a little louder until it sounds less like a rumor and more like common sense. Someone says they did it. Someone says children went missing. Someone says blood was taken, rituals performed, horrors too obscene to describe fully, but too useful not to repeat. You notice how easily the words move from mouth to mouth, how little effort belief seems to require. You also notice who they are. They live close, but not quite inside. They pray differently, speak differently, lend money when no one else will, then ask to be repaid when no one else dares. In times of plague, debt, and unrest, this difference becomes unbearable. Fear needs somewhere to land. It does not like floating. So it borrows a body. Records will one day show how these stories always arrive on schedule, during bad harvests, during sickness, during moments when power feels uncertain. Lies offer something precious, simplicity, a cause you can point at, an enemy you can hurt. The story grows teeth. People swear they saw signs. Proof is assembled backward, shaped to fit the accusation. Doubt becomes suspicious. Silence becomes guilt. Violence follows belief with frightening efficiency. Doors are broken. Homes emptied. Bodies fall in streets that pretend not to notice. You watch neighbors become a crowd, and the crowd becomes something else entirely. Afterwards, there is relief. brief, shallow. The fear does not leave. It only changes address. Truth arrives later, limping, carrying documents no one wants to read. By then, the damage has learned how to justify itself. These legends were never innocent misunderstandings. They were tools. Weapons sharpened carefully by ignorance, resentment, and those who benefited from looking away. You stand inside the aftermath, breathing air that still smells faintly of smoke and certainty. You understand now. Fear does not invent monsters. It assigns them. They say he never sleeps. That he walks through the village while others lie still, eyes open too wide, face stretched thin by nights that refuse to end. You are warned not to meet his gaze. Not because he will curse you, curses are easier, but because something in him is wrong in a way that feels contagious. Lamps are lowered when he passes. Doors are shut softly, like sudden movements might shatter him. You see him eventually. Of course you do. Legends always make sure of that. He moves slowly, not stalking, not searching, just wandering as if sleep were a place he once knew and has since forgotten how to reach. His eyes are hollow, glassy, reflecting light without warmth. He mutters sometimes, words losing their order. His body looks exhausted beyond exhaustion, the kind that sinks into bone. You feel an instinctive fear rise, sharp and unreasonable. It would be easier if he were possessed. Easier if something else were to blame. But the truth follows him like a shadow you can't step out of. Trauma does this to people. Guilt does. Illness that tangles nerves and thoughts until rest becomes impossible. Days pass without sleep. Then nights. The mind begins to fracture quietly. Memory slips. Faces blur. Reality thins. The body keeps moving because stopping feels more dangerous than continuing. People call it possession because possession suggests intervention, prayer, fire, release. Insomnia offers none of that. It just erodes a person piece by piece while everyone watches, uncomfortable and relieved it is not happening to them. Legends grow around the hollow eyes, the endless steps, the refusal to lie down. Fear needs a shape. You learn something watching him pass into the dark. The terror was never that he did not sleep. It was that sleep, the one mercy everyone depends on, can simply decide not to come back. They tell you not to linger at crossroads after dark. Paths meeting like unanswered questions make people nervous. Too many directions. Too many choices. This is where the devil waits, they say. Patient, well-dressed, ready to bargain. A man goes there poor and returns rich, respected, untouchable. The explanation arrives before curiosity does. He sold something. Something important. You hear these stories after someone rises too fast. A merchant whose debts vanish overnight. A minor lord who suddenly has allies in the right places. A farmer whose fields prosper while others fail. Success makes people uneasy here. It suggests movement in a world that prefers everyone stay where they were placed. So ambition is given horns. Fortune is explained away as evil rather than effort, betrayal, or luck sharpened by cruelty. The truth sits closer to daylight. Politics whispered in back rooms. Promises traded quietly. Friends abandoned. Enemies paid off. Alliances made with people who smile politely and remember everything. Power does not usually require demons. It requires timing, secrecy, and a willingness to let others fall behind you. But that truth is uncomfortable. It suggests anyone might do the same under pressure. The crossroads becomes a symbol because it works. It looks dangerous. It feels important. Stand there long enough and you can imagine something watching. Choices are frightening when you admit they belong to you. So the devil steps in, convenient and theatrical, to carry the blame. Still, the fear lingers. Even when you know better, you lower your voice when passing such places at night. Because the stories were never really about demons. They were about cost, about what must be given up, reputation, loyalty, sleep, when you choose a different path. You walk on, leaving the crossroads behind, aware of something heavy settling in your chest. Power always asks for payment. The legend just makes the receipt easier to read. You notice it first because your body expects it. The hour arrives and nothing happens. No bell cuts the air. No familiar metal voice tells you where you are in the day. Silence spreads slowly, like cold, and you feel it settle into your shoulders. People stop what they're doing, confused in a way that feels almost embarrassed. Someone looks up at the tower as if it might explain itself. They will call this a cursed day later. They always do, but the truth is standing right in front of you, plain and unbearable. Disease has thinned the village until routines no longer hold. War has taken hands that once pulled ropes without thinking. The bell did not stop because it was angry or offended. It stopped because no one was left strong enough, or alive enough, to make it speak. You walk the streets and hear your own steps too clearly. Doors stay shut. Smoke rises from fewer chimneys. The air smells stale, unused. Bells were never just sound, they were proof. Proof that someone was awake. That time was being kept. That the village still agreed to exist together. Without them, the day loses its spine. Morning bleeds into afternoon without permission. Prayer forgets when to begin. Work feels pointless without a signal to start or stop. Silence feels supernatural only because it is unfamiliar. Your ears keep reaching for comfort that doesn't arrive. In the quiet, every cough sounds louder. Every distant cry feels closer. You understand then why people speak of curses. It is easier to blame something unseen than to admit that life has withdrawn politely. Without announcement. When the bells eventually ring again, weeks later, months, the sound will feel shocking, almost intrusive. But this silence will remain, stored carefully in memory. A reminder not of magic, but of absence. Of what it feels like when a place is still standing, but no longer speaking back. The stories do not sleep when you do. They linger, stretched thin across the dark, settling into the quiet the way breath settles into cold air. You were told these legends were lies, childish, exaggerated, safely distant. But you know better now. Lies do not endure like this. They do not adapt. They do not keep finding new mouths when the old ones fall silent. These were never inventions. They were translations. Fear trying to explain itself. Grief reaching for language when none existed. Each story softened sharp truth, just enough to be carried forward without breaking the listener entirely. Time dulled the edges, but it never erased the shape. You can still feel it if you sit still long enough. Night settles again, heavy and familiar. The world quiets the way it always has, reluctantly, as if it knows something is watching. Fires dim. Roads disappear back into shadow. Somewhere, a bell does not ring. Somewhere else, water moves without witnesses. The same conditions remain. Only the names have changed. You realize the legends were never meant to frighten you. Fear was just the hook. What they really wanted was memory. To say, this happened. Someone suffered here. Someone vanished. Someone was blamed, buried, starved, forgotten. And if the story keeps breathing, then maybe the loss does not fully win. The past does not scream. Screaming would require energy it no longer has. Instead, it whispers patiently, waiting for moments like this, when the night is quiet enough, when you are tired enough, when the distance between then and now feels thin. If you listen closely, you do not hear monsters. You hear people. Ordinary voices, roughened by work and fear, reaching across centuries with the same request: do not let us disappear completely. And as sleep finally takes you, slow, heavy, inevitable, the echoes remain. Not restless, not vengeful, just awake, waiting to be remembered again.